Well, hi gang, and welcome back to the channel. We're going to try to do something a little bit fun today. At least I think it's going to be fun, but I guess you'll be the judge of that. A few years ago, I got this cabinet here for about $5 at the thrift store, the local thrift store. And it has served us really well as a bookshelf, as storage space. We used to have terrain in there, but now it's filled with rule books and such. And then there's this drawer here, which we might call the Vault of Wargaming Curiosities. It's home to some spiral-bound booklets, as you can see, as well as some older stuff that I thought might get lost or squashed on the regular bookshelf between the hardback books. So I stashed them in here, and there's some really interesting relics from years gone by. So I thought, just for fun, what I'm going to do is today I'm going to dig out what's in this drawer of mystery, and lay it out on the table upstairs and kind of go through it. And we'll take a look at some of the oddities that have been accumulating here over the years. So if that sounds interesting to you, hang on one second while I pull all this stuff out of the drawer, kind of fan it out on the table upstairs, and then we'll take a look and see what we got. Okay, we're back. Here are the contents of the drawer of Wargaming oddities. Things that were older or in a booklet format or that otherwise might not have survived the crush of the heavier hardback codices and such. So we already talked about chainmail in our last video. This is a book that I ordered from TSR mail order back in the early 80s, I believe. And I've had it all this time, so it's a survivor. This here is kind of interesting. I think I have these game pieces somewhere stashed away. But these are the rules for a Parker Brothers game called Conflict. And it says copyright 1940 and 1960. It's one of those games where the pieces kind of look like Risk, and that I think you have cannons and ships. So someday I'll have to dig those out and show you those because they're kind of neat. So that is Conflict from Parker Brothers from way back when. There's stuff in here I definitely forgot I had. Here's a rulebook for Carnival, but probably not the current edition. I've heard pretty good things about this game, but I have never tried it myself. So if you've played Carnival, let me know in the comments what you thought about it. I think this is an older booklet from maybe 10 years ago, so it may not be the current rules. I think I got it because it was cheap. The Lilith's Coven book for Dust 1947. So before Dust finally went away in 2022, they had a brief period where they were incorporating Cthulhu-esque type creatures and scenarios into the game. And there is Lilith, Maiden of the Cult, and the Possessed Lilith, Transfigured Maiden of the Cult. Then there's some cultists and some fungi from Yuggoth. So yeah, we bought into some of this stuff, then we never got to play it, but fortunately, Cthulhu never goes out of style. So that's the Lilith's Coven book. These look like some old GW scatter dice. I might have gotten those for original Necromunda, I can't remember. And here is a pack of Dead Zone proprietary dice. I'm not sure if these are current or not. I feel terrible about Dead Zone because I have at least 2 editions. I think the latest one and maybe the previous one, but I've never played it, which is a shame because by all accounts, from everything I've heard, it's a pretty decent game. So again, if you've played Dead Zone and you have any thoughts about it, please leave a comment in the comment section and that will help me prioritize Dead Zone's placement in the stack. The Warhammer Age of Sigmar Skirmish book from around 2017. We never really got into Age of Sigmar, so I don't think this will ever see any play, plus it's probably out of date. Gothic Horror, Vampire Wars, Realms of Terror, maps, and quick reference sheets. Scary clown. So these maps must line up with some of the scenarios in the actual rulebook, which I have, but we haven't played that. We kind of leaned into Silver Bayonet instead, so we never really got into Vampire Wars. So you may be noticing a trend here. There's a lot of stuff in here that we haven't played, or haven't played much. And so it kind of gets put in the drawer. So this is very cool. Some of you may remember the West End game Star Wars RPG. We got this at a used bookstore for just a few bucks. And here's some of your favorite bounty hunters right here. That is not the Mandalorian. That is the original Boba Fett. And what's that? Bosk. IG-88, I think. And I forget these other guys, who they are. But they're all bounty hunters. So this was published way back in 1988, and one of the really neat things about it is this map in here of the cantina. I'll fold this out so you can take a look at it. So here's Mos Eisley, otherwise known as a wretched hive of scum and villainy. And there is the Mos Eisley Cantina. So I only paid a few bucks for the supplement at the used bookstore, and this alone is worth the price of admission, I think. So pretty darn cool. This would make a good poster. I should put that up at some point. Yeah, always check out the gaming section at the used bookstore. You never know what you might find. This samurai game is really interesting. I forget where I picked this up, but it was apparently published back in 1974. And even though it's just a little booklet, a little spiral bound booklet. It has a couple of pages in here that kind of spread out. So there's the full play sheet. Warrior types, sequence of action, sightings, missile fire, panic effect, precedence of target, and good stuff like that. The London Wargames section, rules for wargamers, 50 pence. Except for Napoleonic Naval, which is 60 pence, plus 5 pence for postage and packing. Obtainable from the Rules Secretary. So Samurai Wargame Rules may be one of the older rule sets I have in the collection. Here's my hard copy of Sword Widows from Garsky Games. We backed this on the Kickstarter, and mostly we use the PDF, but sometimes I just like to have the hard copy as well. So Swords and Spells was my first introduction to rank and flank wargaming. It was designed to work with Dungeons & Dragons. It was published by TSR. So I think this is an interesting rule set if you want to play mass battles in the world of old school D&D, but it is not perfect by any means, though it is diceless for the most part. You do have to roll for morale rolls, I think, but a lot of the combat damage is determined by an average damage matrix. Anyway, we had a lot of fun with it back in the day, though modern players would probably find it baffling. Still, it has a special place in my heart, because as they say, you never forget your first rank and flank. This is the Void 2.0 Squad Tactics book, which I guess is kind of a skirmish version of Void. But it never quite found its way to the top of the priority pile, so into the drawer it went. The Law of the Gun, Skirmish Rules for the Old West by Chris Peruse. So the date on this book is 2014. I was on a kick for a while where I was collecting Wild West rule sets, but this doesn't look like it's a particularly standout example. I don't know. I haven't played it. I haven't really read through it. So if you know different, please let me know in the comments. But I probably just got it for the collection because, completionism. And speaking of Wild West games, doesn't Great Escape produce Dead Man's Hand or something similar? This is Sword and Spear Fantasy, Wargames Rules for Fantasy Battles by Mark Lewis, Polkovnik Productions, if I'm pronouncing that right. So this appears to be another rank and flank game, and I guess this is an example of something I collected without any real burning desire to play it. And to be honest, I'm sort of getting over that impulse to collect things just to have them on the shelf. So I'm not speaking poorly of Sword and Spear Fantasy. It may be a great game, but it's just been in the drawer as far as we're concerned. So again, if you know anything about it, please leave a comment. Maybe it's the greatest thing ever. A quick start booklet for Confrontation Age of Ragnarok. Now, say what you will about the demise of Rackham and how they went from a traditional wargaming company with great metal sculpts to being sort of a mass market company making plastic pre-painted miniatures, but I think, even though the concept was not successful, I think this was a fairly good stab at making a mass market tabletop miniatures game that anybody could get into, particularly younger people, without having to assemble and paint a lot of miniatures. So anyway, the concept never really worked, and a lot of the Rackham stuff went on clearance shortly after the company folded, which is where we got a lot of ours. So anyway, Confrontation Age of Ragnarok. Wild West War Pigs. This is another book I picked up during my Western Wargaming collecting frenzy. Wild West Warfare with Plastic Infantry Guys. Get it? Pigs. Plastic Infantry Guys. Copyright 2006 by Inner City Games. We actually played this game on a live stream a couple years ago, which we ultimately deleted because we mangled the rules so badly. But as I remember, it was really playable. And I really like the concept here because what they're saying is you don't need miniatures to play this game. Just get a cheap bag of plastic soldiers from Walmart or wherever, and you're good to go. So, yeah. Wild West War Pigs. The Codex Galactica from Wiley Games. This is actually a booklet of pre-generated war bands for Galactic Heroes. A Hyena card for the Dungeons & Dragons chainmail game from about 20 years ago. A Blighted Shepherd card for Hordes from Privateer Press. The Death in the Throne Room setting guide for Planet 28, featuring a collection of Dramatis Personae. A fold-out flyer for some Warhammer stuff from the early 90s. I think this was included in my early 90s set of Plastic Chaos Warriors, but I kept a hold of it because it's pretty cool. And finally, a tiny rulebook for Rocket Men, which is kind of a combination of a collectible card game and a miniatures game. You buy a card pack, and then you assemble whatever ships are in there into 3D models, and then you go to war in space. I definitely have some card decks for this lying around, so someday we'll play this. All right, folks, that is the contents of the mysterious drawer of Wargaming mystery. There was definitely some stuff in there I'd forgotten about. Void. I should play that someday. I have a ton of Void miniatures. And Swords and Spells, an old favorite. We're going to break this out for nostalgia someday. I'm working on some 10mm rank and flank fantasy armors we could play on our smaller table here. Sword Weirdos, I got some plans for that coming up. Samurai Wargaming rules. Well, if I had some samurai miniatures all painted up, it'd be interesting to try to take a stab at that, maybe someday. And then, of course, some collectible things from the archive. All right, folks, let me know what you think of this collection of items that got relegated to the drawer. Most of these items are probably just part of the collection at this point, but there's a couple in here that might make it to the top of the gameplay rotation. I guess we'll have to see. Thank you for stopping by today, as always. I hope you enjoyed this look at some war games, old and new. We'll be back very soon with some more tabletop wargaming miscellany, but until then, take care of yourselves, try to have some fun out there, and we'll see you next time.